Still from our respective homes, I'm Richard Rellis here with columnist Bob Robb. What does it mean in this day and age in the U.S. Senate to be bipartisan and overcome what used to, filibuster? This isn't Mr. Smith Goes to Washington anymore, right, Bob? What does it mean to have a filibuster? And what does it mean to get a bill passed in a bipartisan fashion in the U.S. Senate?
Well, these days, the U.S. Senate has what I call a virtual filibuster. Every bill is assumed to be filibustered, even though no one actually filibusters. Mr. Smith doesn't have to take the floor and command attention and figure out how to handle bathroom breaks in order to keep the Senate from acting. So, and we saw this in the police reform bill, and to me, a disappointing vote by Kyrsten Sinema, who professes and often practices bipartisanship, to not allow even debate to occur on a police reform bill crafted by Republican Tim Scott of South Carolina. In order to do anything in the U.S. Senate anymore, it requires 60 votes, which isn't what the Constitution contemplates, and it isn't the way to get things done. There probably is a police reform bill that could capture 51 votes in the Senate. It might be Scott's with some amendments that the Democrats get passed, but there is no bill right now on this subject that can get 60 votes in the U.S. Senate. So rather than moving the legislative process along step by step, it's ground to a complete halt.
Yeah, and in the column, you sort of go through the math of bipartisanship. And do you think that should be situational based on the current makeup of each body? Or are there systems that should be put in place? Like Senator Sinema suggested, like the bill should start with bipartisan negotiations, or as you point out, look at the makeup of the rooms in the House and the Senate. It's going to be bipartisan if it goes through each chamber.
With a divided Congress, nothing is going to pass that's not bipartisan. The Republicans control the Senate, the Democrats control the House. There will have to ultimately be a meeting of the minds if anything is to pass. But I think that the process of legislating is a process of discovering where the political consensus is that will get sufficient Republican and Democratic votes to actually enact something. And when you say in one body, you've got to do that from the beginning. You can't allow that to be discovered through a process of discovering by debating and legislating and offering amendments the way that the process is supposed to work. I think rather than encouraging bipartisanship, you encourage stalemate, inaction, and dysfunction. And I think that is what the virtual filibuster has created in the U.S. Senate, and I think the police reform bill is a great illustration of it. And I think it's regretful that Sinema, who, as I said, preaches and often practices bipartisanship, was part of stopping the process at this point rather than letting the process of political discovery continue.
And we should contact Turner Classic Movies and see if a version of this can be Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, as we discuss how the process used to work and how it works now. Bob, great to see you again.
You bet.